The following program is a special presentation of KSTP Sports.
I'm Bob Bruce, and welcome to another edition of State Tournaments in Review, a program which highlights the outstanding extracurricular activities of Minnesota high schoolers. For the next 30 minutes, our subject will be the winter months, a season which, from the rhythmic sound of skis churning through the cross-country layout in northern Minnesota to the energetic eruptions from another packed house at the Civic Center, is traditionally the busiest and best attended set of activities on the high school schedule. In our fall roundup, the final spotlight was on Barry Wohler, an all-around athlete who in November quarterbacked Bird Island Lake Lillian to its second consecutive Class C football championship. Barry was also one of the many heroes of the winter season. We'll get to another chapter of his boy next door success story right after this. Passing, scoring, leadership, and all of the above under pressure. This rare athletic combination makes Barry Wohler 73 inches of basketball poetry. A few verses were left unwritten this season when the 6'1" playmaker missed 11 games with a hand injury. And while that injury partially explained a less than eye-opening pre-tournament record of 13-10, it may also have been a blessing in disguise. For the other players came together during Wohler's absence and made the defending Class A champs a much sounder unit when their all-state guard returned. Evidence of that theory was put forth in the first half of the Class A final between the Panthers and Winona Carter. Wohler hit just 2 of 9 shots from the field, but a game that could have become a blowout stayed close thanks to a series of jump shots by Tom Neubauer and a layup by Rock Schindler that just beat the first half buzzer. The second half became a battle of offensive artistry between Wohler and a senior guard from Carter, Mark Wiltkin, whose deadly jumper resulted in 22 points. Wohler, who finished with 28, scored Bird Island's first 9 points of the half. His three-point play gave the Panthers their first lead, 28-27. The score was tied at 44 at the end of regulation, and it remained unchanged through the first overtime, a 3-minute session in which Carter held the ball for 2 minutes and 54 seconds. Then failed to connect on a Wiltkin jumper from 18 feet. In the second overtime, Wohler turned an offensive rebound into another three-point play to put Bird Island up by 1. With 46 seconds left, a free throw by Pat Fleming tied it for Carter. Then number 32 in white authored the game's last bit of drama. As the clock methodically evaporated to the 5-second mark, Wohler pulled the trigger from the top of the key. His 23-footer hit the bottom of the net for the winning basket in the Class A final. Wiltkin's desperation attempt came within an eyelash of forcing a third overtime, but it didn't go down. In the last 2 years, Bird Island Lake Lillian has played in and won the only double overtime finals in the 69-year history of the boys' state tournament. In 1981, nearly half of the 16-team field entered the tournament unbeaten. 4 of those teams were in Class AA. but for each, a season-long winning streak ended without a state championship. The first to fall was defending champ Minneapolis North, which arrived at the tournament with a 41-game winning streak, yet was ousted in the quarterfinals by another unbeaten, Austin, despite a 21-point performance by the Polar's muscular center, Red Overton. Austin then left another unbeaten, Chaska, in its wake en route to Saturday's final. But before the tournament was over, the Packers, too, would suffer their first loss of the season. The eventual AA champions, Anoka, boasted a king-size front line of 6' 10" center Trigg Johnson, flanked by a pair of 6'5" forwards, Greg Seifert and Joe Silbernagel. In the finals, Silbernagel had the hot hand in the first half, dropping 8 of 13 shots from the field and scoring 17 of his game-high 23 points. Hard-working center Lee A.C. kept Austin within striking distance. A.C. finished with 20 points, but the Packers' leading scorer, Bruce Anderson, was plagued throughout by foul trouble, and in the second half, Johnson found the touch inside. The big center scored 15 of his 21 points as Anoka methodically pulled away to a 61-53 win. Its second state title since 1973. The unbeatens discovered a better fate at the 7th annual Girls State Basketball Tournament. In Class AA, Coon Rapids' perfect record was in jeopardy just once. In the semifinals, the Cardinals, down by 5 with 28 seconds to play, scored 6 points before the buzzer. Amy Yeager hit the game winner, this 8-footer with just 3 seconds left, as Coon Rapids ousted the defending champs, Little Falls, 57-56. Otherwise, the Cardinals' pressure defense operated at juggernaut efficiency. In all fairness, the final victim, St. Paul Harding, battled for the championship minus 50% of its 1-2 offensive punch. Sandy McGon played sparingly because of a knee injury, and 13 points from Carolyn Beebehauser was not enough to offset the balanced Coon Rapids attack. Yeager and Dawn Anderson led the charge with 10 points apiece as Coon Rapids won the AA state title, 60-42. In Class A, the defending champ Albany was beaten in the first round by the team it beat for the 1980 championship, Austin Pacelli. Nevertheless, Albany made its mark at this year's tournament in the person of senior guard Kelly Skulicki. Skulicki, a varsity member for 6 years at Albany, closed her brilliant high school career with a state record. She scored 102 points in the 3-game tournaments. The new Class A titleist in Minnesota is unranked but unbeaten, Heron Lake Okabena. The school consolidation of 2 small communities in the southern part of the state knocked off then favorite Pacelli 52-42, then bested Moose Lake for the championship. Moose Lake's Annie Adamczak scored 22 points despite playing the entire second half with 4 fouls. But Heron Lake's Amy Christians, Chris Ferguson, and floor leader Pat Burns combined for 46 points. Heron Lake Okabena won its first state championship 62-46. The winter season also included a courageous effort by a swimmer from Bloomington Jefferson and a classic matchup at the State High School Wrestling Tournament. We'll have those stories and more right after this. His name is Scott Rupert, and just 1 year ago as a sophomore, this youngster from Bloomington Jefferson was a record setter in the 200-yard freestyle and a state champion in a pair of events at the boys swimming and diving championships. The athletic future looked bright for Scott until he was told by doctors that his swimming career may be over.
Doctor said I have a rheumatoid arthritis. He told me that about 11 months ago. And he says I can swim about 3 times a week and not to go very hard at it, just take it easy and work into it. I can stay in shape for the shorter events, not the longer events like I used to be able to. I can only practice like 3 times a week for about an hour at a time. Before I was going 10 times a week, twice a day.
The medical circumstances prevented Scott from defending the titles won in 1980, but he was able to compete and swim well in 2 relay events. Jefferson, in fact, won the 200-yard medley relay, but in the case of Scott Rupert, first isn't the only definitive term for state champion. Mounds View unseated Jefferson for the team title at the 81 meet. Swimmers from Mounds View collected individual titles in the 100-yard freestyle by Chris Tati. The 100-yard backstroke by John Rydberg. And the 400-yard freestyle relay, where those two, plus Dave Rydberg and Mark Johnson, combined to set a new meet record. The other record setter at this year's tournament was Mike Kubas of Henry Sibley, who again won the state championship in the 100-yard breaststroke. Other champions included Scott Minchow of Lakeville in the 500-yard freestyle. Glenn Dixon of Minnetonka in both the 200-yard individual medley and the 100-yard butterfly. His Minnetonka teammate, Dave Miskowitz, in the 50-yard freestyle. Burnsville's Jim Brzezinski in the 200-yard freestyle. And Ron Oman of Rochester, Mayo, who became the new state champion in 1-meter diving. This winter's lack of snow may have made it hard for most of us to get into the mood for skiing, but that was no problem for these youngsters as they prepared for the 4th annual cross-country ski tournament held at Sugar Hills in Grand Rapids. There would be a new champion in the boys' competition. In fact, 9 of last year's top 10 had graduated, so the field was wide open. And considering the locale, it was kind of poetic that the 1981 boys champion hailed from Grand Rapids. Steve Shooter covered the 10-kilometer course in a time of 35 minutes, 58 seconds. That was just 8 seconds faster than Jim Dow of Edina West. His Cougar teammate, Mike Creeder, finished 3rd. Their strong showing sparked Edina West to the team title. Top honors in the girls' competition went to Barb Unzen, a junior from Cloquet, with a time of 20 minutes, 44 seconds. Armstrong's Lisa Kofglin, a winner in the Class AA cross-country running event last November, finished 2nd. And Kelly Kimball of Blaine took 3rd. 1981 was not as kind to last year's winner, Kathy Klungness of Burnsville. She finished back in the pack. The girls' team champion also came from northern Minnesota. The winner, Aurora Hoyt Lakes. While most of the cross-country champions came from northern Minnesota, the metro area took most of the prizes in the slalom championships held at Welch Village. The most amazing performance came in the girls' competition. This is Andrea Saderak of Stillwater, last year's runner-up. On her 2nd run, she falls down, but gets back up and not only completes her run, but does so fast enough to finish in 1st place. Just 0.2 of a second ahead of Bloomington Kennedy's Barb Yeager. Coming in 3rd was Carolyn Lau of Blake, and her performance led the Bears to the team title. Individually, at least, the boys' competition was not much of a contest. That was because of a fine individual performance by Don Ship. This senior from North Branch had the best run of the day, 25.36 seconds, and his total time for both runs was over a second faster than that of runner-up Carl DeBruzzi of Hastings. The team competition, however, was much closer, with only 2 points separating the champions, Stillwater, from the runners-up, Duluth East. From the daring how in the world do they do that routines on the uneven parallel bars to the cautious yet confident steps on the balance beam, nowhere is the grace and beauty of high school athletics more evident than at the girls' state gymnastics tournament, which again this year was held at Hollenbeck Hall in St. Cloud. In Class A, the team championship and the top individual honor went to Blake, whose leading performer, sophomore Carolyn Booz, captured gold medals on the uneven bars and the floor exercise. She won the Class A all-around. Carolyn's teammate, Libby Forbes, made a major contribution during the team competition. She also won the individual title in the vault, while Cheryl Sather of Jackson held the top score on the balance beam. Cheryl was the all-around champion in 1979. The unexpected result at this year's tournament came in the AA all-around, where the winner was not the heavy favorite. two-time defending champ Angie Barnes of Edina West. Angie posted scores of 9+ in each of the 4 events as West handily won its second-team title in the last 3 years. But in the all-around competition, she faltered in perhaps her best event, the uneven bars, and finished second by 0.03 of a point to Jackie Nelson of Kellogg. Jackie had the top score on the uneven bars and finished second to Barnes on the balance beam. The other individual title in the girls' state gymnastics was won by Susie Litsky, a sophomore from Hastings. At the outset, the busiest tournament on the winter schedule, the 44th annual Boys State Wrestling Tournament, resembled a 3-match circus at the Civic Center in St. Paul. In 3 days, more than 500 wrestlers battled through nearly 700 matches for the 24 individual and 2 team championships. Needless to say, the selection of a key match in this maze of activity is nearly impossible. On the final night, however, with just under 13,000 spectators on hand, the spotlight shone brightest on the Class AA 112-pound duel between Todd Goosey of Austin and Pat Whelan of Brainerd. In the past 2 years, Whelan had won a pair of titles on the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, while Goosey captured back-to-back state championships in Minnesota, and in the process compiled an 84 consecutive match winning streak. That streak, however, ended in the finals. Goosey scored the first 2 points on a first-period takedown, but Whelan recorded a second-period escape, added 2 points with a takedown of his own, then rode out the match in the third period to win the state championship 3-2. Despite the loss, Goosey finished his spectacular career with a record of 107 wins and just 7 losses. Quickly, here's a look at all of the individual champions. In AA, 2 of the state champs came from Albert Lea: Mark Indralee at 105 pounds and Scott Hanna at 126. Bloomington Kennedy also had a pair of champions, Dave Wicklund and John Morgan at 155. The new AA heavyweight champ is Jim Luzar of Richfield. In Class A, a brother combination, Rick and Dave Goeb of Monticello, captured titles at 98 and 105 pounds. Dave Goeb was last year's 98-pound champ, the only defending champion to win a second state title. At 155, Ray Zanda gave Browerville its first ever individual state wrestling championship. The Class A heavyweight title went to Steve Baumgartner of Olivia. In the team competition, Albert Lea wrapped up a perfect season in the AA finals. The perennial power out of southern Minnesota built a big lead early on, then narrowly defeated Elk River 26-23 with the AA championship. In Class A, Staples, a co-champion last year, won its third team title since 1978, defeating Waterville Elysian in the finals 30-18. One footnote, the 44th wrestling tournament drew a record crowd in excess of 58,000. Just 1 week later, the Civic Center was jammed again for the state high school hockey tournament. We'll have that story for you right after this. The state high school hockey tournament, without question, athletically, it's Minnesota's pride and joy, partially due to the excited sellout crowd atmosphere that surrounds it, but particularly because of the play itself, which at the high school level is as fine as you'll find anywhere. Again this year, attendance totals hovered around 18,000 spectators per session, and those at the Civic Center, along with the additional thousands watching at home, were treated to another memorable tournament. Defending champion Grand Rapids fell to Bloomington Jefferson in the opening quarterfinals. Rapids was in command, a 3-1 lead with 8 minutes left, when Jefferson struck for 2 goals, the first by Dan Beatty, the second, this spectacular play by Steve Bianchi.
Nelson behind the net. He's checked off the puck. Lavasser feeding it to the right point. And the man goes at the point. There's a big bell, and here comes Bianchi over the line. He works it by one man going right, and he scores! Oh, what a goal, Bianchi!
Bianchi's goal forced a sudden death overtime, an extra session which lasted just 49 seconds. When it ended, Bloomington Jefferson was in the semifinals.
The puck comes back into the right circle. It's cleared to the line, but not out. A backhand shot by Renner goes wide to the right. Becker driving it off the glass, and it got by Renner at the point. And Kellen comes over to pick it up in the Grand Rapids zone to the left. To the left of the goal, takes a hit from Norris, puts it out of front. Oh! Goal, Gas!
The second quarterfinal was a near carbon copy of the first. Apple Valley and North St. Paul were tied at 3 at the end of regulation. This time, however, the overtime lasted just 29 seconds. Bruce Hegland scored the game winner as Apple Valley advanced to the semis 4-3. The evening session opened with perhaps the biggest upset of the tournament. Top-ranked Edina West ousted by South St. Paul in a game which included the wildest final 5 seconds in state tournament history. All but those much talked about 5 seconds had elapsed in the third period when Larry Housley scored to give the Packers a 2-1 lead. That goal was the game winner, but the game was far from over.
Plumman's wig back on defense, and here comes Chapman, drives the shot, kicked out, rebounded. Oh! The time is over! The game is over! It went in after the final buzzer. There's no time left. Fisk scored, but the game is over. South St. Paul wins it, and Edina West doesn't realize it yet. Now they do.
The green light went on, now the red light went on.
If the green light went on first, the game is over.
Could be an offside. Might have been an offside. Offside. Oh my gosh. Will you ever see a finish like that?
Not only was it offside, but time had run out, so it doesn't matter either way.
The linesman, without the hindsight of videotape, made the call as he saw it in a pressure situation. It stood. South St. Paul over Edina West, 2-1. Irondale concluded the first day action and began its path to the championship game with a 7-3 win over Roseau. The Knights then rallied to beat South St. Paul in the semifinals. Goaltender John Downing was brilliant throughout. Dave Kerwin scored the game winner late in the third period. Then Steve Hoppy hit an open net as Irondale won it 5-3.
There it is. There's Hoppy lobbing a backhander right from his blue line. And dead center. It couldn't have been more perfect. It's right into the center of the net.
The Knights had never been to a title game, nor had Bloomington Jefferson. But the Jaguars made it an all-out first-time final with a semifinal win over Apple Valley. Dan Beatty scored a pair of goals as Jefferson prevailed 4-1. A crowd of just under 18,000 was on hand for the championship, a game which was scoreless until 9:44 of the first period, when Dave Kerwin's goal gave Irondale a short-lived 1-0 lead. But Jefferson struck for 2 goals on its own before the period ended. The first a power play effort by Jim Becker.
Threading his way to the line now. Leaves it drop to Beatty at the left point. Across the right point. Now in the near circle, a score! Becker whistling it in just on the short side inside the right post.
48 seconds later, the heat was on again in the Irondale end. Paul Guest converted a rebound to make it 2-1. Jefferson then added another at the start of the second period for a 3-1 lead. This goal proved to be the game winner.
And now Ono relays, and Bianchi tried to pick it up on the backhand side but was unable to get it. It comes back into the Irondale zone. Clearing attempt held in by Gass, puts it in front, and a long shot. It's good! Bianchi may have tipped it. The puck was fired by Mazzu, but Bianchi looked like he might have dropped his stick on it at the edge of the crease. Time of the goal is only 57 seconds into the period. That makes it 3-1 Bloomington.
Jefferson dominated with defense and goaltender Scott Robidoux from there on out. Irondale scored with just 4 seconds left, but the 37th State High School Hockey Tournament brought state championship number 1 to Bloomington Jefferson. The final, Jefferson 3, Irondale 2. The trophies from the winter season have already been awarded, and of course the spring season is well underway here in Minnesota. Now later this month we'll take a special look at some of the fine arts activities, programs which we don't often hear about, but programs which boast a participation level in excess of 60,000 students. We'll have that for you on May 30th. And we'll be back with our spring edition of State Tournaments in Review sometime in June. Until then, this is Bob Bruce. Good afternoon.